Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. So in this video I want to talk to you about being detained at the border by the counter-terrorism police. So I've noticed that a couple of people that I follow, so there was that Callum guy that worked for Carol Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, the Lotus Eaters. He worked in the Lotus Eaters. He was detained by the counter-terrorism police and he had his electronic devices seized and had to give up his passwords and stuff. There's a guy called Paul Thorpe who is now in Spain, who's been detained when he's came back to the UK from abroad, and he's faced a grilling and that sort of thing. I don't know if he's had his devices seized or I can't remember. And one of his mates, a guy called Danny in Spain, he was detained on return to the UK and he had his electronic devices seized and he was interrogated and had to give up his passwords and that. So this has happened to quite a few people, so it has. So basically the way this works is, right, you have zero right to remain silent if you're detained, and you have to give the police your passwords for your electronic devices, any tablets, any phones, any other sort of communication devices, laptops, that sort of thing that you might be carrying. So they can basically go through your entire life, your bank accounts, your apps, your social media, the lot. And you have to cooperate, otherwise if you don't cooperate and give them your passwords and that and don't answer the questions, then you get hit with some sort of terrorism charge, which I believe actually can carry a prison sentence. So you can actually go to prison for a wee bit of time if you don't cooperate. Now, I believe that they can hold you for, I think it's 6 hours they can question you for. I'm not sure, it could be longer than that, I don't know, but I've heard the 6 hours figure. So basically, the other thing is you are not entitled to legal representation. It's not a, like, they don't have to provide that for you, and it's not something that, like, you can try and delay the process until a lawyer turns, they just won't let you're taken into a room, you're interrogated, and if they take your devices you need to give your passwords and that, and you have to answer the questions. It's as simple as that. If you keep stum, then that goes against you and you are hit with a terrorism charge. So, but what I wanted to say about this is that if I've heard that they ask you things like, right, so what's your view on the British state? What's your view on the war in Gaza? What's your view on Israel? What's your view on the Jewish people? What's your view on the Muslim people? Like, they ask you all these questions like that, and it's things like, the British state, do you agree with the British state? Do you have a problem with them? And all that cat, and they ask you these things, right? Who in their right mind, right? Who is going to turn round and say, yes, I hate the British state, I think they are evil, I think they are against the people, I think they should be overthrown and all that? Who is going to say that in their right mind? Nobody's going to say that unless you've got a screw loose in there. Do you know what I mean? Nobody's going to say that, right? And they'll ask you things like, I believe that you're likely to be detained if you come back from certain destinations like Russia. Russia's a big one. So I think that this happened to that Callum guy of the ex-Lotus Eaters presenter. So he was in Russia for a bit, and I believe they asked you who you spoke to, where you went, what was your purpose being there and all that. Who's going to turn round and say, my purpose for being there was I was going to meet up with Dmitry Medvedev of whatever, the KGB or whatever Russian spy organisation, and he was going to give me 50,000 rubles to put out propaganda on YouTube and various electronic platforms and to try and give him like British state secret. Who is going to turn round and say that? You're not going to say that. You're not. Like, I think the best thing you could say is, right, I mean, I don't encourage criminality here, right, but like, would most people not just be like, I just went to Russia on a holiday, do you know what I mean? And I've got an interest in going to see like the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg or the Red Square in Moscow, and if they start asking you about the war in Gaza and all that, like if they ask me that, right, I'd be like that, look mate, I don't give a flying fuck about the war in Gaza or any of these other wars. I don't support Israel, I don't support the other side, I don't give a fuck. I've no got a pot to piss in, mate. I'm just a simple guy that's just trying to get by in life, do you know what I mean? I'm got my own struggles here. I'm just trying to make sure my family are provided for, and that's basically that. I don't have a strong opinion on either side. I don't give a fuck, mate. I don't care. I don't care. But, like, that's the kind of thing that I'd be likely to say. I wouldn't go into a big spiel about, oh, blah 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 and this and that, and like why would you do that, man? Why would you do it? Like you're just digging a hole for yourself, do you know what I mean? I'd imagine that if most people were savvy about it, they'd just be like, I don't have a strong opinion, I couldn't give a fuck. Not my circus, not my clowns. And like asking you about the British like politics and all that, and what do you think and all that, and like I'd be like, mate, I've checked out you all, do you know what I mean? I don't give a flying fuck about politics, do you know what I mean? Nothing ever changes for the better. I don't have a strong opinion one side or the other, do you know what I mean? If they start asking you, oh, what's your opinion on Muslims and that, and like, I don't interact with any, I don't really know any. I know that the corner shop and many of the shops round about me are staffed by Muslims. I don't have anything against them. I just go and get my groceries and that's that, do you know what I mean? No, like, I can't imagine that, like, how like, nobody's going to turn round and say what they really think about these people and all that. You're just not, do you know what I mean? So how can they prove otherwise? How can they prove that, do you know what I mean? Like, if you did perhaps take money from a state actor in Russia or wherever, or blah blah blah, when you were there, like, as long as it was the, like, in your bank account and that, and like, I don't know how would, like, and you're like, not carry it, if you'd managed to dispose of it somehow without like putting it in a suitcase or this, that, like, do you know what I mean? If they searched you and they couldn't find it, like, who's going to admit to that? Do you know what I mean? There's nobody's going to admit to that, do you know what I mean? Like, you're going to take precautions so that sort of thing, you're not carrying a big wad of cash on you, do you know what I mean? Or like, how are they going to prove anything against you unless you start telling them that you've got this view against this group of people, and you start shooting your mouth off, do you know what I mean? And then they've got like a rope to hang you with, do you know what I mean? But like, as far as like, how are they going to prove it unless they had somebody following you in Russia, or you went on holiday and they were surveilling you and all that, do you know what I mean? But that's pretty far-fetched, I think. So my question is, like, I'd like to hear from anybody that was detained. What sort of questions were you asked? How did you answer them? And as far as giving your passwords over, there's not a lot you can do if they seize your device, do you know what I mean? But like, I could think that maybe, like, leave your original phone at home, do you know what I mean? I would think that most people who were into really, really, really dodgy shit would have, like, burner phones and all that would be, if they had contacted some state actor or whatever and arranged this, that, and the next thing, they're going to dispose of the phone and they're going to buy an El Cheapo shiter phone, do you know what I mean? Just so that they can contact their friends and family. Like, so, honestly, I want to know, like, if anybody's ever been detained, how you handled it, what happened, they take your devices, how long they had them for, did anything ever come of it, how did you answer the questions and things like that? Because I just think it's, like, I think if you were smart about it, you could just make up bullshit, man, and I don't think they'd be any the wiser, do you know what I mean, unless they were tailing you and surveilling you and all that for years, do you know what I mean, and unless you were, like, failing to cover your tracks and that, or, do you know what I mean? So, like, the average person that stopped, like, what can they really do? Do you know what I mean? What can they do? Anyway, thanks for watching.